This is like the third time that I'm trying to come in and do this. And because there's a whole bunch of people out there who are going to sit here and berate me for having a thought or having an opinion or whatever else. And I guess the one thing I do want to say 100% is, if you hate this show because of woke culture arguments or because there's lesbian witches or whatever dumb reason you may have, we are not the same. I have real reasons for disliking this show, and we'll talk about it right now. What's up, my know-it-alls? Okay, so we're going to be talking about The Acolyte. Why am I in a different environment than normal? I'm in Florida visiting family, but I wanted to get this review out. It's not going to be very long because, yet again, the episode is not very long. I'm also not really going to get into as deep when it comes to the story stuff, because at the end of the day, I'll tell you the upshot. I was intrigued. This is not a bad episode, with the exception that it's not an episode. And I think that's my biggest problem right now with The Acolyte. When I tell you it's got bad writing, I don't necessarily mean the story they're telling, because I don't even know what the story they're telling is. Now, there's a vocal group out there who's going to be like, well, just let her finish and let it all finish. And I'm like, well, okay. Let me walk you through something real simple. Very, very simple. In storytelling, there's a thing called structure. More popularly, some people do it in 3-act structure. That's usually movies. Series like this tend to do them in 4-act structure, and that's fine. And what 4-act structure is you have a first act, a second act, a third act, and a fourth act. And each act serves a purpose. The very first act, generally speaking, introduces you to your character and your heroes. The second act introduces you to the situation, the dilemma, whatever. And you can call it through whatever, the inciting incident or whatever you want to call it. That's fine. By the third act, you're deep into it, and the character has had to make a choice. And now you're moving in you're moving in the direction of the resolution or the climax. Sometimes your climax comes at the end of the third act. Sometimes it comes at the very beginning of the fourth act. And then you go ahead and you go downhill from there. Downhill, not in a bad way. Downhill in the sense of your storytelling arc has now culminated, and now you're headed down toward the resolution of your story, whatever that is. Each of these acts feels very much cohesive and carries you from one to the next to the next. The audience should feel certain things at certain points. This is part of the formulaic way of writing. Now, you could argue and push back against that, but trust me, I've written Hollywood scripts, I've written television scripts. I understand how this is supposed to work. This show doesn't do that. And it's not even not doing it in a clever way. For instance, Quentin Tarantino and Pulp Fiction, that's the easiest example, does this very disparate storytelling style that is jumps around the narrative. But even in that, within the context of each of these narratives, you're still getting structure. This series, when you do what they've done, which essentially what they've done is they've said, okay, Leslie Hepplin and her writers wrote a movie. And then they subdivided the movie into smaller pieces. Now, in a normal writer's room for a series, your showrunner is also a writer, and your showrunner comes up with the concept overall and says, okay, this is what we're going to do. And you guys break the story together, you blue sky. You break the story together as a group, and you sit here and you say, okay, this is what the story's going to be. And everyone's like, okay, cool, I want to take these chunks. Awesome. And then everybody takes that chunk and they write their episode. Now, the showrunner's job is to then, as those scripts get turned in, they then have to evaluate not how it fits in the overall narrative, though that is there, but how it fits within its own narrative. Every episode should still adhere to the 3 or 4 act structure. Now, there's 8 episodes, so I'm going to do them a favor and assume we're going with a 4-act structure. That being the case, last night's episode was episode 6. That means we should be at the tail end of the third act. And it does not feel like we're at the tail end of the third act. We should be looking down the barrel of whatever the climax is going to be. And I feel like we're hip deep in the second act. This entire series, tonally, has been all over the road. I read last night, I was so floored. I went online last night, and all these people were like, "This is brilliant. I love The Acolyte. It's so great. I love the pace and the story, like this and that." Stop being so starved for stuff that you just accept mediocrity, because all we're going to end up getting is mediocrity. This is a $180 million series that House of the Dragon has just north of that, the budget. And we get 8 full hour-long episodes, and I'm only on episode 3, and I feel of that, and it feels like a much bigger, it feels like a narrative, it feels full, the universe feels involved, the story is tight and intricate, and every episode does its job. This is lazy. This is lazy all day. Disney shareholders, they stole your money. The acting was great. Fine. It was funny. I was intrigued. I was into this episode. I was genuinely, what Kamir and is doing with Osha was really good. I was like floored. If this had been what most of the series was, I would have been in for this whole thing with never a complaint, because this episode was excellent in terms of where it was starting and then it cut off. It's not just the cutting off that upset me. There's other tiny things throughout this whole thing. Like they're already telegraphing that Vernera, whatever her name is, the green lady, is she's somehow potentially associated with the creation of the bad guy. Now he's a fallen Jedi or a former Jedi, and the reveal of her thing was everyone's online showing the comparison pictures between his scars and the fact she has a whip lightsaber. Leslie Edlin said in an article last week, she believes twists are not there or shouldn't be there to surprise the audience. The audience, all twists are telegraphed on some level. It's just a matter of how you execute it. First off, that's a load of crap. Anyone who reads anything like Sherlock Holmes or anything of that nature, do things that give you a surprise, if you will. There should be hints with red herrings of what's going on. Now, everybody thinks, they're like, I thought it was her mother. I thought it was this. I thought it was that. They were telegraphing that. The minute Kamir showed up, I was like, let's go to the bad guy. I can't read. Like, I feel that there's something about him that felt off. And it was because the narrative didn't flow correctly. He was too inquisitive, he was too this, whatever. Anyway, it was just wrong. The same thing with Vernera. Vernera has been off the entire series. So all of a sudden, you see his thing, you see her whip thing, and you go, click. And you sit here, and immediately all these pieces come together, and I'm like, that's why she's felt off. Now, people might argue, well, that's how you wrote this and that, because I love how dismissive the internet can be. Look, if you have an intelligent answer beyond, well, that's just how it is, stop complaining, why are you watching? I'm watching because it's a train wreck. I'm watching because I can't look away. Because I'm watching this thing that I'm sitting here going, how in life did this get made? So this episode is actually the tightest narratively speaking. It's saying interesting things. It has stuff to say. And my whole thought is, why didn't you build the whole series off this premise? Now, the argument would be, well, we did, but this and that. No, you didn't. You built it on a weird MacGuffin-y, whodunit with a very sloppy opening. You have characters that are supposed to have background and history with one another who are treating each other as if they're strangers. You have this the whole thing's been a mess. And again, when it's finished, I absolutely promise you, I am going to watch the entire series again in a day. I'm going to binge the whole thing because I need to see if what I've been reading individually meets out on the bigger scale. And you'll probably get a video essay. Whether you watch it or not, it's entirely up to you. But I'll probably get a video essay because I need to really digest what's happening because this is not what the way they've done it. If it holds up fully as an actual full long thing, then they would have done a disservice to Leslie Headland. Right now, this entire episode felt like, look at all the fancy ways that I can tell stories and look at all the things that I can do. And then, we cut. We cut in what felt like the beginning of the third act of this episode. I feel like next episode, or the very tail end of the second act, I feel like next episode, we're going to be in the tail end of the second act, into the third act, and then finally, and we'll get the rest of the story of this because this is, again, part one of an episode. I'm not sure what the runtimes are. If anyone saw those, let me know. But I don't think I looked last night and I didn't see. I've been looking online to see if anybody had ever had all the runtimes of all the episodes. I'm fairly certain the last episode will probably be like the first episode was, which is a much longer episode. Probably, or it may even just be shy of that, like a 40-minute or 46-minute episode. I don't think it's going to be a full. I don't think it's going to be a full like 45 or 46 or 50-minute episode. I don't believe that. Every writer in every series has a responsibility to give audiences a satisfying conclusion, so that just in case you aren't renewed. I heard her, she's already talking about, she has things she would want to do in a season 2, 3, 4. And I'm like, I don't know how this story goes to a season 2, 3, 4, because it's all over the road. It's erratic. Again, we've seen wonderful things and ideas put into this thing. And please understand, I've always said this and I genuinely mean this. If you like the show, God bless you. That's awesome. I'm so excited. I genuinely wish I did. But the mistakes and the irresponsible show running are so glaring. And once more, if you don't like it because it's got a female lead or a black lead or whatever, or because it's woke culture and don't have white people or lesbian witches or whatever else, we are not in the same camp. We are not the same. My criticisms are genuine criticisms of the series. Genuine criticisms of how it was put together, how it was assembled, how it was thought through, how it was executed. I don't have any issues with quote-unquote woke culture, whatever else nonsense. My issues are genuine to the actual show itself, because it's breaking a lot of rules that are there for a reason. Or if you're going to break them, i.e. Pulp Fiction, you break them artistically with an eye to the flow of somehow it should still feel like a cohesive thing, and right now it doesn't. There's allusions to Jedi politics that mean nothing, and by mean nothing I mean they've been there, but they've been nothing burgers. Don't even get me started with Twinkie Jedi who's helping her assistant Jedi who's just a punk completely. This guy is getting just shut down and he's weaselly, and I'm just like, how in the world did you send a dozen or more, or however many, 8 or 9 Jedi on this mission, and you bring with you 2 red shirts and Twinkie Jedi? I say Twinkie Jedi because he's all like, well, I'm not sure, Miss Brain. Should we be doing? I don't. Why are we doing this? Okay, and I'm just like, and she's so dismissive. Now, some people might be like, well, maybe she's just being characterized as a horrible person or whatever else, and I'm like, that feels lazy. Because it is. It's being lazy. Because even the worst characters, think of any character you've ever hated from media. I don't mean hated because they were written badly. I mean just characters that you were like, oh, I can't stand it. Ted Lasso has a couple of those. They're written to be like that. Those are my criticisms. I'm not going to go too deep into this episode because we don't have the whole story. What I will do is next week, I will actually review both together as the way I normally do. So I will actually go into, the episode starts with, and this and that, and this happens next week. Because we're going to get the second half of this episode, yet again. And none of that, by the way, is how it's supposed to be. People are like, oh, I'm so into this, I can't wait for next week. You're not getting a full story ever. And the idea, and if you keep shouting to the rafters, wait till she's done, you'll see where she's going. Understand something. I am. That's why I'm still on this train. It hasn't gotten better narratively from week to week. They have not set up enough for me to I do not trust this story. because I do not believe it is going to be a satisfying enough ending. Whether it's they end on a cliffhanger expecting a second season, or if Darth whoever shows up and is like, ha ha ha, and ends it quickly to then pull her in, it all feels contrived. All of it. And again, we'll talk about all that. We'll talk narratively about the story stuff next week when I can actually appreciate this first, because this first half is actually, I get it. I like what's happening here. The stuff with Saul and May, a little messy, but at the same time, Saul's doing wonderful work again. Young is I always get his name wrong. Please forgive me. Is doing great work still. I felt like him stunning May was, where did that come from? Are we supposed to conjecture and assume, because they're not giving us any subtitles, to know what Basil or the droid were saying, or Pip were saying? So we're supposed to just conjecture some things, and I assume somehow Saul knew what Basil was saying, or maybe now Saul begins to sense that something was off based on May's behavior. There's a lot of assumptions that are supposed to be made. What they're supposed to show and not tell. Yeah, but showing in the abstract doesn't help anyone. So again, a lot of mess. There you go. Now you know. As long as you have to battle, you have to be know-it-all yourself. Comment below. I am not reading this episode yet because I'm not going to do like last week. I'm not going to split this up. Next week, I will give a total rating for this episode, this half, and next week's half. Because there has to be more. There has to be another half of this, the way they've diced it up. And plus, we'll know more if we're now entering the fourth act. Though nothing feels like it could possibly be satisfying enough. Because next week's also the penultimate episode, which that has its own set of rules. If you followed me for any stretch, you know the penultimate episode is supposed to do certain things. It either is where the climax of things happens, or it's the beginning of the downward slope of where things have happened. And so, or it either sets up the final episode, which is the resolution, or it does the climax or set up right up to the climax, which will start in the last episode. I don't know. I don't know how you resolve all of this satisfactorily to this point. I'm here because everyone insists, wait till she's done. I'm going to wait. I'm going to see the whole thing in its entirety. And then, after I watch the last episode, I'm going to do a post-mortem. In the industry, a post-mortem is exactly what it sounds like. It's after the fact. You look at, evaluate everything, what worked, what didn't, and you look at it as a whole. Shows like Saturday Night Live do that pretty regularly. Right after the show, they'll sit there and they'll start diving into what went wrong, how to fix it. Same thing. I'm going to dive into what went wrong. Everybody's trying to see, how do you fix Disney? I don't need to fix Disney, but I want to know why this story is the way it's been. Because this feels like everybody who complains about Obi-Wan and Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka, this feels like all of those complaints, the real ones, in one show. I feel like Obi-Wan had its stuff, Ahsoka had its stuff, Book of Boba Fett had its stuff. This has all of those problems. And we'll talk about all of that in the postmortem after the series is over, when I get a chance to really look at everything as one narrative. Oh, trust me, Mrs. Doer's not going to be happy. Last night she says to me, as we're talking, because she's still home in Georgia, she says to me, I need you to understand, I will never rewatch this show. If you want me to, I will rewatch She-Hulk before I rewatch this show. And if you know anything about my show, if you've seen any of our reviews together, her and I did, you understand what assertion that is. So, all right, guys, comment below. Let me know what you thought of the episode, or half of the episode. And we will talk again next week. Don't forget, I'm going to start being regularly on Nerd Fights. I won't be this week because I'm traveling, but I will be home in time for next week. So we will definitely be on. I will be on Nerd Fights on their Patreon live watch right after the episode, as well as on the more open on the YouTube one on the following day on Wednesday. So that'll be next week. All right, guys, I'll talk to you again very soon. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.